What a weekend, JC. Mate, what a weekend. Mate, on Friday night when Alex Johnston blazed down that western touchline off a peach of a pass from Latrell to plant the ball at the Paddington end of Allianz Stadium, we weren't just witnessing a fantastic rugby league try, we were watching one of the greatest moments in Australian rugby league history. Alex Johnston, AJ, our little mate from La Perouse, he eclipsed Ken Irvine's seemingly untouchable record as our game's highest all-time try scorer. Now, Johnny, I know you were there, soaking in the atmosphere, cheering on your beloved Chooks. We're going to get to your thoughts and the overall experience in a while. But before we get to that, mate, how's your week been?
G'day, Noz, and hello, listeners. Yeah, it's been a pretty good week, and obviously dominated by the man of the moment, Alex Johnston, and those manic scenes around that record-breaking try. I'm actually also pretty happy because my Chooks got the win. Although, let's be honest, that result was slightly overshadowed by AJ and the history that he created. But I'll dive into that a little bit later on in the show.
It was almost like the best of both worlds for you. So you not only got to witness a really special moment in rugby league, and I know that you are a rugby league purist. You love being parts of those moments, but you had the added bonus of the Roosters winning. So you must have walked home with a very big grin on your face. I'm also looking forward to your insights. You lived the moment, so I'm sure you've got some great things to talk about. But before we get to that, Johnny, we should acknowledge something pretty remarkable that's happening here at NRL Offside. We have officially burst our borders.
Wow. Really?
Mate,
Please explain.
everything has borders, Johnny, but here at NRL Offside, mate, we refuse to be trapped in the corner. Last week I heard from a very reliable source, well, okay, it was Marty Doran, one of my oldest and dearest friends, that we have a listener in Western Australia. Now that's Marty himself, but that's beside the point. Mate, what is the point? What is the point is we have now officially become a bi-coastal operation. NRL Offside has made it across the Nullarbor. We've entrenched ourselves in the Golden West. Now, it is perfect timing, Johnny. You know, next year the Perth Bears are actually coming into the competition. NRL Offside will be there to spread the rugby league gospel before the Bears start doing bear things. But, mate, that's not all. I heard from another dear old workmate of mine, so shout out to Odessa. Hopefully she's listening or watching, that we've gone live in Queensland.
Wow. Mate, Noz, we become national in 3 weeks. Amazing.
Mate, we have. And what do they say, mate? First we take Brisbane, then we take Berlin.
Oz, relax, buddy, mate. Let's just concentrate on Australia before we start worrying about Berlin, mate.
Give it to them. World domination doesn't happen overnight, but we have made some massive steps in that direction. So watch out. Now, the next thing that we have to talk about before we get onto the footy is something that happened last week, Johnny. There is another elephant in the room that we do need to address at this particular point.
Elephant, mate. Go on. I'm intrigued now. What's this about?
Oh, mate, you know it as much as I do. Last week, the speed round. Now, when we talked through our various segments, we talked about the speed round as potentially being one of our show's real trademarks. A weekly launch pad, 2 minutes, quickfire recap of the previous weekend's games, get the blood flowing, get the show moving, put everybody on the front foot, really warm us and the listeners up for what's just about to come. So that was what it was supposed to be?
Yeah, that's the plan. Maybe we went a little bit off track.
Yeah, a little bit off track. Mate, last week, our 2 minute speed round segment, it actually took 6.5 minutes. 6.5 minutes, Johnny.
Wow. I think I know where this is going, mate. We were driving in a 40-kilometre zone where we should have been driving on the Autobahn.
I'm not entirely sure we were driving at all. I think the lug nuts had come off the front tyres. We were in the gutter on the side of the road. But, mate, a couple of things. At this point, I'm going to put my hand up. For those people watching, I've got my right hand lifted way above my head. Mate, I'm going to own my own part in our speed round debacle last week. But if I was Alex Twal, you were Jamal Fogarty being run down by Josh Papali'i. Mate, in a segment that was supposed to go for 2 minutes, you spent 3.5 minutes on the Chooks Warriors game. Now, again, this is a partnership that I value. I don't want to stitch you up here. I'll give you a bit of a chance to defend yourself, mate. Well, what do you have to say for yourself?
Okay, guilty, noted. And as of this week, I'm going to be bringing my inner gout. So I'm going to pick up the speed. And mate, by the way, that was a great ankle tap from Big Papa on Fogarty a few seasons back. So I didn't think it was too bad, mate. Come on.
Don't try and deflect. I actually felt like ankle tapping you myself last week, but I think I was moving too slow. But the simple fact is, mate, we are reinvigorating Speed Round this week. So we're going to make sure that it's everything that we initially said it was going to be. We're going to have discipline. We're going to have structure. And mate, to that end, we've put together a brand new jingle for it. So, mate, this jingle has a couple of aims. Firstly, it's going to announce the segment. I've had some feedback that we have had some transition issues over the first few weeks. But more than that, it's going to remind us to keep our pace up. So, mate, here it is. I don't think you've actually heard this. So just bear with me while I press some buttons here. Yeah. Now, mate, it won't go away. Mate, like everything to do with Speed Round, it probably goes for about 10 seconds too long. But what did you think? What were your thoughts on that?
Mate, I'm not even going to ask where you plucked that from. It sounds like the music of some of those nightclubs that I used to sort of in the late 1980s. Jesus, but I love it, mate. Well done.
Mate, I was thinking the Castellaresian Club, mate. Yeah, I'm sure you spent a little bit of time there in your Euro mullet heyday. But, mate, it's important at this moment we do not get lost in our happy memories. We just need to think high tempo, Johnny. It's all about keeping the pace. All right, so Speed Round. Let's go. 2 minutes, 8 games. The round kicked off with the Brisbane Bullets versus the West Sydney Razorbacks. Oh, wait, it was the National Rugby League, not the National Basketball League. The Parramatta Eels beat the Brisbane Broncos in a high-scoring defensive no-show that quite frankly would have had Warren Ryan swallowing his dentures. Over in Auckland, the Warriors claimed another big scalp in consecutive weeks, taking down the Raiders with a second-half power surge that has the rest of the competition casting nervous glances over the Tasman. Alex Johnston. Now, repeat that 211 more times. Unfortunately, the Rooster forwards, Collins, Wong and White, also turned up and spoiled the Alex party in a strong showing for the Chooks. And did I say turn up? Did I say turn up there, Johnny? Well, made no risk of that from the Cowboys. It was more like wrap me up. A listless North Queensland was smothered by an orange wave in front of the Tigers faithful at their spiritual home at Leichhardt. Mate, it is going to be a long, long season for Toddy P and the boys.
All right, moving to the Dragons and the Storm. To be honest, I didn't think the scoreline told the full story here. Mate, the Dragons came back from behind twice and even led with 17 minutes to go. And then the Storm, well, they just do those typical Storm things. They actually scored 5 tries in 17 minutes, including a hat trick from their new number 1 freak, Fa Alongo. And then basically the score just blew out. Moving to Panthers and the Sharks, I actually thought the Sharks might have got a little closer to Penrith with the game being played in Bathurst, but the men in black, the defensive wall looks well and truly back. It actually reminds me of their four-peat era. Only 2 rounds in, it's pretty clear to me that Penrith are the team to beat in 2026. Moving to Manly versus the Knights. Mate, no big guns for the Knights with Kalen and Brown both coming off injured. Mate, no problem. Newcastle kept their Sin City form rolling into Brookvale by really overwhelming Manly at Brookie in a pretty spirited performance. Mate, we're a long way from the business end, but mate, the Seagulls, mate, they're in a rabble. Seabold is under enormous pressure. And finally, the Dolphins versus the Titans. Tell you what, watching this game, when all else fails, just throw the ball to the hammer. Look, to be fair, the Titans were a lot better after their miserable showing versus Cronulla the week before, but It's the old saying, speed kills was on full display thanks to Hamaso. And, when he gets a bit of space, mate, good luck catching him.
Mate, that's how it's done. That is how it's done. A properly timed speed round. Well done.
Mate, can you check the stopwatch? Did we come under budget? I think so.
Well, mate, I'm looking at the little timer in the top right-hand corner. I think we got somewhere in the ballpark of 2 minutes. Mate, as for budget, I don't think you can blow a budget when you don't have one. Now, mate, onto the segment we call What Caught Your Eye. I think people have probably worked this out from the show's introduction, but there really is only one place we can start, only one thing we can talk about this weekend, mate.
It's all about the man of the moment, Alex Johnston, and what a moment! And as you said, I'm so glad I was there to see it live. Um, AJ's record try for me just actually happened in a flash. I'd barely sat down after the halftime break when Latrell, mate, surged down that left-hand sideline, mate, threw a great pass to AJ, and then the young man just hit the gas and sprinted away. Mate, as we all saw, mate, Allianz erupted. People jumping the fence from everywhere, storming the field. Mate, not a care in the world about the $5,500 fine. Even old mate Anthony Albanese getting amongst it, which was pretty cool. And then what was even better was a Rooster supporter was the first one to reach AJ. So that was brilliant. And I'll be honest, mate, it was absolute pandemonium at the stadium. As I said during the last episode, I thought it would be pretty cool if the crowd stormed the field if AJ did break the record. Well, mate, it was a lot more than cool. It was actually mind-blowing. We're going to talk about those scenes for years to come, in my opinion. And just on AJ, mate, I've always admired him. Even though he plays for my fiercest rival, mate, he's a humble bloke. He just goes about his business and just has a knack of scoring tries. And you got to remember, it was only a few years ago he had that pretty bad Achilles injury, and not many thought he'd get back to his best, let alone chase down a record like this. So now the guy sits alone at the top of the all-time try scoring list. In my opinion, that's legendary status. He got a statue actually unveiled for him yesterday down at Heffron, and I just loved how he came back after the crowd ambush with the number 2 on his jersey in the gold color. I thought that was pretty cool. No, it's just something else I thought I'd raise. I actually stumbled across some pretty cool rugby league history over the weekend. When Ken Irvine broke the record way back in 1969, the team he was playing for, the North Sydney Bears, lost 26-18. And on Friday night, and you know what happened, it was the same result for AJ, mate, same scoreline. So there's a little bit of history repeating itself.
Mate, that's a great stat. And I can't believe the North Sydney Bears lost.
Well, they're coming back next season, which is fantastic. Now, just before I wrap, mate, it'd be a miss of me if I didn't share this. And another thing that caught my eye from the Roosters South game, and I'm not sure if it was picked up on TV, but the big scoreboard screen at Allianz had the game listed as Roosters versus Visitors. Mate, no mention of Rabbitohs South, just listed as Visitors on the scoreboard. Now, I'm not sure if this is part of the Roosters Our House Allianz campaign, or if that's how the away teams are going to be listed going forward. But anyways, interesting. Watch this space. And that's it for me, mate.
Just like to say, I'm really happy that you did make it back to your seat in time. You're probably just waiting in line in members for your Chianti, making sure that nobody stepped on your R.M. Williams boots. But mate, I pretty much agree with everything you said about Alex Johnston. I mean, he's one of those blokes that everybody in the game admires, and I'm sure that everybody who's a fan of rugby league had a smile on their face, particularly when the crowd mobbed him after 213. There's been a whole heap of nonsense written about Albo and not why he's on the field. He shouldn't have been on the field, the $5,500 fine. Mate, that's all rubbish. I think you were spot on when you said that this is a moment that we're going to be watching for the next 20 or 30 years. Mate, there is one thing I want to just chat about with the record, though. I looked at a few other all-time records in world sport. There's Ronaldo's record for the most goals in world soccer. There's Tendulkar's highest number of Test cricket runs. And the other one that's caught my eye, and it only happened in the last year or so, was LeBron James setting the benchmark for most points in the NBA. Mate, those things, they're notable for not only reflecting incredibly high play, but reflecting incredibly high play over an almost staggering period of time. So again, I've got some facts and figures here. Ronaldo has averaged 0.74 goals per game over 1,300 appearances.
Wow.
Tendulkar, 53 runs an inning over 329 test innings. And LeBron's played 1,600 games or over 1,600 games in the NBA, and he's averaged a titch over 27 points. So, mate, again, the longevity aspect of it, to me, is one of the most amazing elements of it. And AJ, well, mate, he certainly belongs in that rarefied air. He has averaged a pretty incredible 0.87 tries a game over 245 games. So, mate, from NRL Offside, we do tip our hat to AJ. It was a fantastic achievement. Mate, the whole Roosters versus Visitors thing, I reckon they should go one further. So why don't they just make up humorous, derogatory names for their opponents? So, mate, Souths on Friday night could have been the Green and Red Rodents. This is a little bit of a throwback to the time when I was the lone Parramatta fan in Daceyville in my days at St Michael's Primary School. Mate, Para could be the paraplegics. The Broncos could be the naysayers, mate. You could just have like hours of fun because if you're going to be petty, you might as well be funny. Mate, I'm going to leave this one to you as the first officer of the politest propaganda unit. Mate, maybe you could get on the phone to Uncle Nick. You could make that suggestion. Mate, it'd be a real hoot.
Mate, Noz, behave, mate, behave. Come on.
It is now time for the grapple. Now, mate, you know that the grapple is one of my favourite segments. It's where we wrestle over the game's hot topics. Mate, you're in the seat today, so what have you got for us?
Okay, the topic that I want to throw around or maybe even wrestle over, pardon the pun, is the new state of origin eligibility rules. Now, if I've understood it correctly, players who represent tier one nations like New Zealand or England can now be eligible for origin as long as they came through the junior pathway in New South Wales or Queensland. So examples that come to mind, Victor Radley, England, or even back in the day, Sonny Williams could now play Origin. Obviously, players representing current Tier 2 nations like Samoa or Tonga, they've always been allowed to play Origin. Example, To'o and Stephen Crichton. Now, I've got to say, I'm a bit split on this new change. On one hand, I like the idea of having the absolute best players from New South Wales and Queensland going head to head, regardless of who they represent internationally. But I'm also a bit of a traditionalist when it comes to Origin. Back in my day, and you remember this, Noz, mate, Origin was basically an audition for the Australian team. If you dominated Origin or played pretty well, it'd be a pretty strong chance you'd be pulling on a kangaroo jersey not long after. Now, to me, that stepping stone becomes a little bit diluted because under the new rules, you could have players dominating an Origin series. So somebody like a Kalen Ponga, again, I'll mention Stephen Crichton, for example, they'll never be in the frame for Australia because they've committed to New Zealand and Samoa, respectively. So you could end up with a situation where someone gets picked for Australia, but they didn't even feature in that year's Origin series because maybe the Origin teams were just stacked with players who are actually going to be going on to represent other nations. So for me, that's quite a shift from what Origin traditionally represented. But maybe it's just a sign of the times, especially with the huge Polynesian influence in the competition. And a lot of these players growing up through the New South Wales or Queensland pathways, even if their international allegiance lies elsewhere. So, look, I get the rationale. It really helps strengthen international rugby league. It obviously makes Origin probably even bigger in terms of best versus best contest. But part of me just still wonders whether we're loosening that traditional link between Origin and the Australian jersey. And then I start thinking about passion. Where does a player's true allegiance really sit? And I just think about take someone like Jerome Hughes, for example. Let's say he qualified and got picked for Queensland. Obviously, he's the current Kiwi number 7 internationally player. Can you imagine Jerome Hughes running down the Suncorp tunnel screaming, Queenslander? Or do you sort of picture him more fired up, performing a haka at Eden Park when it's Australia versus New Zealand? So that's the part that I'm still trying to get my head around. So for now, I'm split on this one, and I'll just see how it plays out in this year's Origin series. What's your take on it, Noz?
Mate, to be honest, I absolutely hate it. And the more you talked about it, the more I did hate it. Now, this is no disrespect against the nations or the players involved, but to have Kiwis like Jerome Hughes, Brandon Smith, I actually think it's a straight up travesty, to be honest with you. They aren't New South Welshmen. They're not Queenslanders. When it comes to the blokes who have actually chosen to play for England, so you mentioned Victor Radley, but there's been a few over the last couple of years. We've had Billy Smith, AJ Brimson. Mate, my philosophy with that is sleep in the bed that you've made. If you've chosen to be a Pom, then go be a Pom. Now, here is where it gets a little bit complicated. I absolutely love the renaissance of international football that's come via the Polynesian nations, but I'm sure you'll agree with me, but Tonga, Samoa coming in, mate, it's been a real shot in the arm for the international game, which quite frankly had been lagging for the better part of 30 years. Mate, I also think it's great that the kids are jumping at the chance to play for those teams because in a lot of circumstances, it represents more than a country. It's their culture, it's their family, it's their blood. But I think it's important that we recognise that these are Aussie kids. They should be playing for Origin. But the real complication is the one that you actually outlined. So their eligibility for their island nations has actually broken that link between the Origin and the Kangaroos jersey. Now, I can't quite work out what the thinking has been from that particular point. Volandi's rationale seems to be that if we're going to have tier 2 nations with eligibility for Origin, why not extend it to tier 1 nations? I mean, he's always looking for an edge. He obviously wants the best players for Origin, and that may include people that have been through New South Wales and Queensland pathways but have now declared for another country. But mate, it just doesn't pass the sniff test. It doesn't. I mean, it's dumb. And I think people are just going to see right through it. Mate, we do have a bit of a conundrum with the tier 2 nations and Origin eligibility, but I think it's a terrible solution to throw the gates open. So it seems to be leaning into something which doesn't really work in the first place. It's going to really upset the fabric of the game. It's going to really mess with Origin, and I don't think it's going to be as special. It also seems a case where we're trying to solve a problem that doesn't really exist. I mean, yeah, would I like to see Billy Smith or AJ Brimson or Victor Radley playing Origin? Mate, I would. But, mate, I also would have liked Kenny and Dolly to record a few more duets. I'm not going to lose any sleep because they didn't. Or I'm not going to stop listening to Islands in the Stream. Now, maybe this is just a parochial rant. Maybe this is just being a little bit restrictive and a little bit closed-minded. But to be honest, I do not want Kiwis and Englishmen playing in Origin. I think it dilutes the test arena. I also think it's going to ruin what makes Origin so special.
Yeah, no, I agree, Noz, 100%.
Geez, that was a good grapple, Johnny. That's exactly what we want with the grapple, just to be able to get things off our chest. Two middle-aged men ranting. But, mate, now on to bigger and better things, onto the round preview. So, mate, we had a crackerjack round over the weekend, some really, really interesting results. This week is firming up as a week of interesting encounters as well. Let's start with the Raiders versus the Bulldogs.
Okay, mate, this is going to be an interesting one. Canberra got smashed in their last hit out, which I wasn't expecting, and the Dogs haven't played since Vegas. Yet they're still dominating the headlines with Mr. Bronson Cherry, the situation there, and there's obviously a little bit of noise around the club. I think Canberra might get this one done, especially playing at home. But I'll be honest, I'm not 100% confident.
I was chatting with one of the too many Bulldogs fans in my life during the week, and we were talking about the Doggies' defence. Over the first couple of weeks of the competition, it seems as though tackling has gone out the window. We talked about the big margins in last week's show. Again, the round of football that we just had, there were a lot of big margins as well. And I actually think that one of the cheat codes for this year is going to be having a stout defence. Mate, Canterbury have a stout defence. They might be clunky in attack. It hasn't been a great week for club dynamics with everything that's going on with Bronson Jerry. But, mate, defence wins big games, and this is a doggies team that has a lot of resolve. Mate, the Raiders over the first couple of weeks, I don't really know how you would describe them. They went into Manly and got that last gasp victory a couple of weeks ago. That victory hasn't aged particularly well in light of the rubbish that Manly put up on Sunday. On Friday of last week when they played the Warriors, mate, they were underdone. The Warriors put them to the sword. I think Ricky's been into them this week. I think Ricky is well and truly aware of the fact that they do need to be a lot more resilient. But, mate, it's Canterbury for mine in a defensively oriented game.
Yep. All right, moving to Roosters versus the Panthers. Okay, my team. Mate, the men in black, mate, they've been a real bogey team for the Roosters in recent years. As we were talking before, I actually thought the Chooks were pretty good against the Rabbitohs, especially the forwards. But they'll need to bring that same intensity again on Friday night and probably a bit more if there any chance. I'm hoping for a little bit of Sammy Walker magic. But this is seriously a tough assignment against a heavyweight side with the likes of Cleary, Yeo, Dylan Edwards, Toto, and the rest of that Penrith machine. So, yeah, it'll be an interesting game to watch on Friday night for sure.
Mate, I don't think you tip anyone. You sitting on the fence, you not wanting to tip against your beloved Chooks. Who are you tipping for the game?
I always tip the Chooks, but I'm just saying it's going to be a mass. It's going to be a massive assignment. I think we've beaten them once in the last 5 years. So let's hope it's twice in 5.5 years.
Mate, I think the word for that is obfuscation. Now, you mentioned the fact that the Chooks have had trouble with the Panthers for the last 5 years. There is a reason for that. The Panthers, over that period of time, have been elite, and the Roosters haven't. But in saying that, it will be a good test for the Chooks. They did put the train back on the track against the Rabbitohs last week, but let's call a spade here. They were playing against an undersized pack in South Sydney. Lindsay Collins was great. I've been off Collins now for about 12 months, but I thought he was head and shoulders the best player on the field last Friday night. Mate, there's nothing undersized about the Panthers, though. So the forwards will have to turn up. The elephant in the room, mate, it's a day of elephants in the room. The Roosters halves, they just need to be better. Walker was much better defensively against the Rabbitohs, but mate, DCE did nothing. He was doing a headless chook impersonation again. I thought they actually left points on the board against Souths, and mate, Penrith don't give you many opportunities. If you leave points on the board, they're not going to give you a sniff later on in the game. I think the Panthers are going to be way too strong. I'm sorry to say this, Johnny. I don't even think it's going to be a close encounter.
It's a bit tough. All right, let's move to the Knights versus the Warriors. Now, look, the Warriors made a 2 from 2 to start the season. Great start. It's actually going to be the first time they're going to be playing away from home. Now, look, if Newcastle had their two big names on the park, Brown and Ponga, I'd really give them a serious chance to take this one out. But I think the Warriors at the moment are looking pretty confident. And, mate, Tanner Boyd, mate, he looks like a rejuvenated player. So I think the Warriors will win this one. I think they'll just be too strong here.
I feel really bad for the Newcastle Knights. Mate, they have been fantastic over the first couple of weeks, and they've had some horrendous injury luck. In that first half against Manly on the weekend, we had Ponga go down with his hamstring. Then we had Dylan Brown go out with his MCL. And, mate, it's a real shame. This one was shaping as a crackerjack encounter. I still think the Knights are going to put on a show. But I've actually been quietly impressed with Sandon Smith. He never quite found his groove when he was at the Roosters, but he's got a great short passing game. He also has the ability to spot a gap and accelerate into the gap. He did it a couple of times against Manly. And Justin Holbrook, mate, I've always had a rap on Holbrook. He had a great stint when he was coaching over in the Super League. In retrospect, he probably did better with the Titans than we gave him credit for. It is a very, very difficult job to coach up there on the Gold Coast. But we do need to factor in that the Warriors have been the form team of the competition over the first couple of weeks. We also have to factor in that it's the Warriors. They are playing away. They traditionally haven't been a great team away from the comforts of Mount Smart. I think this is going to be close. That said, I mean, you can't pick anyone but the Warriors. The Warriors have been pretty inexorable over the first couple of rounds.
Okay, let's turn to Sharks versus the Dolphins. Look, I think the Sharks will be too strong here, playing at Ocean Protect Stadium. Mate, I've got to say, I love the new name for Shark Park. I had a bit of a giggle when I read that this afternoon. Look, I can actually see Cronulla putting on a few tries in this one, led around by Mr. Tricky Trindle, pulling the strings. As for the Dolphins, well, mate, the game plan is pretty simple. Just give the ball to the hammer and see what happens. I'm probably being a bit cheeky here, but I think a few of their other key guys in that team really need to step up. Probably starting with Katoa, to be honest.
Just going back to Ocean Protect Stadium, mate, in our lifetime, it's gone from Caltex Field. Remember, it used to be Caltex Field? So the Caltex refinery at Kurnell probably killed all the ocean life. Now, now they're trying to protect it. Now, do I have a take here? Do I have a take here, Johnny? Maybe the Sharks? I mean, mate, the usual level of midline competence will probably be too good for the Dolphins. But, mate, you hit the nail right on the head when you talked about Katoa. So I mentioned this earlier, and you alluded to it in your review. At times over the last season and a half, Redcliffe have resembled an under-sevens team. So when you go and watch an under-sevens team, all the kids know who the fastest player is. If things get a little bit tight, they just look for this fastest kid and they pass them the ball and hope for the best. Now, they need to be a little bit more than that. I know that Hamiso is a good fast kid and he can often turn nothing into something, but Katoa is the key. He has been well below his usual level of high play. Last year in the Pacific Championships, he really wasn't very good. He didn't bring much to that Tongan team, and he needs to get back to being the focal point. If he does get back to being the focal point of the team, this Dolphins outfit becomes a lot more dangerous, but it's a big if. And again, mate, Cronulla just have that knack. They have that ability to come in and beat teams that are mediocre. I think that they're going to get the win.
Okay, let's move to Tigers versus the Rabbitohs. Mate, I actually liked what I saw from the Tigers last week. Their attack looked really sharp, led by obviously Jerome and Appy. In fact, I thought it was probably Luai's best game for the Tigers so far. And I reckon they're a real chance of knocking over the Rabbitohs, especially with that game being played at Gosford. So it'll be interesting to see how South respond after the huge emotions of last Friday night's game. And I'm actually predicting Alex Johnston to score another double. But I've actually got the Tigers just maybe taking this one out.
Now, mate, I was interested to learn that this game is being played at Gosford. So, yet again, the Tigers just absolutely bamboozling us with where they're playing. I'm pretty sure it's not a Tigers home game. Not 100% sure. I did look at the NRL website and Souths are listed first, so I'm making the assumption that it's a Souths home game. But thanks, Souths, for making it even more confusing as to where the hell the Tigers play every week. In saying that, mate, I'll sort of concur with some of the things that you've said. It is a good matchup. So both of these teams are pretty lively. They both have points in them. South's Achilles heel, which was exposed by Lindsay Collins, Siwa Wong and Niafu White last week, is their lack of middle size. I don't think that's going to be tested against Wests. Wests have got some good mobile front rowers, but they don't have the sheer bulk that the Roosters have. But the Tigers have plenty of pep. Their tails are up. This should be an entertaining game. Mate, at this point, we need to acknowledge the Cody Walker factor as well. Mate, to call him Rocks and Diamonds at the moment would be a compliment. He's more like Dustin Zircon. He was dreadful last week against the Roosters. Mate, he was terrible. So he was mistake prone. He was ill-disciplined. He was defensively weak. Every time South's got a bit of a roll on, Cody would pop up and do something stupid just to absolutely cruel it. He needs to get better. If he isn't better, Souths will be beaten, and it's also going to be a very long season. But in any case, I'm going the Tigers. I liked what I saw last week.
Okay, let's go to your mob, the Eels versus the Dragons. When I look at the Dragons, they've actually been right in both of their first two games this season. And look, unlucky against the Dogs. And as I said earlier, they're actually leading Melbourne with 17 minutes to go. The Eels, on the other hand, mate, they were poor early against Brisbane, but then roared back into that contest. This one honestly feels like it's anyone's guess, in my view. Mitchell Moses is the key for the Eels, but if the Dragons bring their sort of gritty game, they could actually grind this one out defensively. So, look, I think the Eels will win, but as I said, if the Dragons bring that grit, they're in there with a chance.
Mate, this is a game I'm pretty worried about, to be honest with you. I mean, finally, we've got some home cooking for the Eels. Thanks to the NRL for eventually sending us back to our home ground. Again, the scheduler. There's just a few nagging thoughts I have about this game. Para look to be the favourites, but I am a big believer in reversion to the mean. This Dragons team, mate, they're not a 0-3 team. And as loath as I am to say it, Parramatta at the moment do look like a 1-2 team. So it could well be just one of those reversion to the mean games where teams settle into where they're gonna sit. That said, the Saints don't have much in attack. Parra does have a bit in attack. Thought Pezzett was good last week. I might have been ranting and raving about his defence for the first 20 minutes of the game, but he certainly came good in the last 60. But I'm tipping the Eels for this one, but they do have to be better in defence. Otherwise, this is a game that might bite them in the backside. That Dragons grit might just get over the top of them.
Yeah. All right, let's move to the Cowboys versus the Titans. Actually, somebody asked me during the week who I thought might be the first coach sacked in 2026. My first response was I said either Todd Payton or Mr. Seabold from Manly. So there's definitely a bit of heat building up around the Cowboys and Payton, especially if they were to lose their first home game of the season. I think the Cows should get the biscuits here. But as we all know, mate, stranger things have happened up there in that Townsville humidity. So I'm not confident, but as I said, I think the Cows should get this win.
Mate, I'm not sure if I said this or not last week. If I did, I'm happy to repeat it. Todd Payton has taken over from Adam O'Brien as the most miserable-looking coach in the competition. Mate, I was just looking at Toddy in the coach's box when they were playing the Tigers. He literally looks like a bloke who has to go home and tell the kids that the family dog's been run over. And, mate, it's no wonder with the performance of this Cowboys team over the first couple of rounds, particularly last weekend against Leichhardt. The coach always gets the blame, and again, it's probably fair. The coach gets a fair degree of the credit when the teams win. But, mate, come on. He's not the one out there missing the tackles, dropping the balls, looking like he doesn't want to be there. In saying that, though, I think this could be a turnaround game for the Cowboys. They are up in Townsville. They're playing against the Titans. The Titans showed a little bit more pluck in last week's game, but let's face it, they're not the 1985 Bulldogs when it comes to defence. I think the Cowboys could put a score on them. Okay, now, mate, on to the game of the round. There were a few to choose from, but in a week where you get a grand final replay, that is the only possible game of the week. So, mate, what's your take on the Storm and the Broncos?
All right, so mate, their last outing, as you said, was the 2025 grand final, and we probably saw him, in my view and probably everyone's view, probably the best individual performance ever by a player in the GF, and that was our man Reece Walsh. Fast forward to now, and mate, Grease Lightning, mate, he's got off the boil a little bit, to be honest. Mate, the Kangaroo Tour, he wasn't super great. Club Challenge in the first two rounds this season. Mate, the Rocks are definitely outweighing the Diamonds when it comes to Reece at this point in time. Meanwhile, Melbourne, mate, they're just rolling through beautifully, even after losing a bit of talent from last season. But any side with Munster, Mr. Harry Grant, and Jerome is very, very hard to beat. Melbourne should be too strong at Amy in the GF rematch. I actually think it could be a scoreline, and probably we won't see too much glass smashing from Bellyache in the coach's box if that was to happen. So Melbourne, for me, I think quite comfortably, to be honest.
Yeah, I think the coach's box might be safe in this one. These are two teams that are heading in different directions at the moment. The Storm, I mean, we've gotten used to this in the Bellamy era. They're their usual clinical selves. They've started the season off very professional, very businesslike, and that's been reflected in their performances and the high standard of them. The Broncos, well, let's face it, mate, they've been adrift. I know there's all sorts of scuttlebutt coming out of Red Hill about Maguire's harsh coaching methods and the players not responding to them, but this just seems like a team which isn't on the same page at the moment. In saying that, this game means more to Brisbane than Melbourne. The Broncos better play like it. Mate, 0-3 is a terrible way for any team to start the season, let alone the defending premiers. And I fear that if that's the case, their season's pretty much done and dusted. in saying that, though, you can't go past the Storm, particularly at Amy Park.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay, Johnny, mate, it's time for my favourite segment of the show, and that's freeballing. So, mate, last week you talked about your top 8 predictions. Very enjoyable, certainly lots of food for thought, but I'm going to take it in a slightly different direction today. I know you sort of expected me to do that, but a history-making weekend. My freeballing segment today is a celebration of a very, very important part of our game's past, and mate, that's the great old suburban grounds. Now, I think I probably know the answer to this, JC, but what's your favourite?
Look, as a young kid, teenager, mate, it was always Leichhardt Oval.
Mate, I had the slightest inkling that you may have zagged and gone with the Sydney Sports Ground, but yeah, Leichhardt. I know of your fondness for Leichhardt Oval, mate. And part of the catalyst for this week was the Tigers playing at Leichhardt on the weekend. It always just looks glorious on an autumn afternoon. But I'm actually going to go a bit further west. Of all of the great old suburban grounds, Leichhardt, Jubilee, Henson, Brookvale, North Sydney Oval, mate, my favourite is Lidcombe Oval, the old home ground of the Western Suburbs Magpies. Now, not entirely sure why. There's certainly nothing flash about the place, but mate, when you go there, it just feels like good, tough, honest footy. And that's particularly the case with the grandstand. Now, the grandstand was built when Lidcombe was built, so it's about 90 years old. But 3 years ago, it was renamed after the great Tommy Raudonikis. Now, I think you'll agree that's pretty appropriate. Now, the grandstand itself, it's his lovely old brick and aluminium structure. Like a lot of those old grandstands, Henson's the same. It does have some sightline issues, so you sort of be scanning the field and you'll have a giant column in front of you. But, mate, the thing that really stood out to me when we were there a few weeks ago watching a game is the lack of leg room. There is absolutely no place to put your feet. So I'm talking drape your legs over the seat in front of you in terms of how much space that you've got. And again, a typically random thought that I had when I was sitting there is how much bigger people have got. And that includes football players. And of course, that led me onto a deep dive. And I did a bit of research on this, Johnny. So, mate, just clock this fact. Dennis Fitzgerald, he was the starting prop for the 1976 Parramatta Eels grand final team. Mate, he weighed 88 kilos. Now, just to put that into a modern context, Payne Haas in last year's grand final was weighing in at 117 kilos. So Payne Haas was 30 kilos heavier than Dennis Fitzgerald. Now, I'll admit at this point, I did have a bit of an ulterior motive. I was aware of the fact that Dennis Fitzgerald was considered undersized even in the era in which he played. But this one, mate, this one really blew my mind. His partner in the Eels front row in that grand final was Graham Olling. Now, again, Graham had a long and storied career. He was an international. He was regarded as one of the bigger props going around at the time. But, mate, I mean, just check this out. He's actually smaller than Aneta Claudia Nuasala, who was the starting prop for the Brisbane Broncos NRLW grand final team last year. So, mate.
That's unbelievable. Fitzgerald, an 88 kilo starting prop. Mate, a lot of halves weigh that these days. Jesus.
Mate, absolutely. So, mate, this week's free balling, apropos of probably nothing at all, it's a rumination on the great old footy grounds as well as the evolution of our species. So, mate, that's us. That's a wrap for another episode of NRL Offside. A big shout out to our listeners in Perth, our listeners in Queensland. Mate, the signals are spreading out. Hopefully we'll get some in Lord Howe Island, maybe in Noumea. Where do you reckon we're going to go next, mate?
Mate, the empire's growing, mate. PNG maybe next.
PNG? Oh, mate, why just have our sort of aspirations so low? Why don't we go a little bit higher? We'll go into Jakarta. But, mate, we take Brisbane, then it's onwards and upwards. So, mate, if you want to just take us out.
Mate, bye for now, listeners. And, look forward to coming back for episode 4 next week. Have a great week, all.